7:05, and I will call the Manchester Finance Committee meeting to order on Thursday, November 21st. We have with us in the room Maury Creighton and myself, Sarah Mellish, and on Zoom we have Andy Olderman and Dean Nahas. And our town administrator, Greg Fetterspiel, and town accountant.
And I'll call the Essex Finance Committee to order at 7:05. And we have Mike Flynn, Nina McKinnon, myself, Ben Buttrick. We have our town accountant, Michaela Nolan, on the line.
Okay. Then I believe from the school committee, we have Anna Lynn Mitchell and we have Chris Reed. Are you from the school committee? And Jake, what's your last name?
Foster.
Jake Foster, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you knew Jake.
And, oh, I've met him before, don't worry, but I get confused.
That's
It
okay.
always helps to go over the names one more time.
And Pam Bedoin, I don't know.
Yeah.
how-
Yeah,
Oh.
hi, Sarah.
I don't know how to pronounce your name, I guess I'll never learn.
Bowden, like the college.
And Michelle Cresta, the finance person at school is on. That looks like it. Okay. So I guess we've introduced each other. Do we need to do any more introductions?
I don't think so. Everybody knows each other?
Well, kind of.
Pretty much. We come here when it rains, Sarah. Every time we come here, it rains,
I planned it that way. It's only been 2 months.
pretty much.
Ben asked for the date.
I know,
It's his fault.
of course it is. He had to shoehorn it into his busy schedule, so
Better rain than snow.
Yeah, exactly.
bite your tongue.
So I think we wanted to start with the fiscal year 26 town operating budget outlook. Each town, it's kind of early in our process, but we kind of have a sense, and I don't know where you stand in your process and what your sense is for your budget for fiscal year 26.
Yeah, we've started our budgeting process, and we are meeting as liaisons with the departments, discussing their needs and getting a gauge on where they are. We do have some things coming up. We've got 2 union contracts being negotiated this year. We have water infrastructure, which we're starting, but we have $2.2 million not on the tax rate that is being used to start that process. And we have 47 years to replace all those pipes. So we have plenty of time for federal earmarks and grants and state things. I think one of our bigger issues is going to be wage and salary schedule, particularly with the fire department. As you may be aware, we are a fully call fire department. And although we have a wonderful number on our roster, only certain numbers of people show up to answer calls. And many of the people on our roster are actually not even residents of Essex. So, and they're very low on the wage and salary schedule. So what we really are fighting, of course, is a full-time fire department. So we'll be working closely with the chief, and our chief is a stipended position. It's not a full-time, it's not a part-time, it's a stipend, and 2 deputy chiefs. So we'll be working with them closely. We're going to build out a full-time department and then start backing into what we need to do to actually keep our call department going. We want to keep it going for as long as possible. They do a great job at covering Essex, both from a fire department standpoint and an EMT standpoint. Our ambulances are self-funding, so it's a lot of our capital costs end up coming from grants that they apply for, and I'm compiling a list of everything that they've received a grant for, because the town doesn't understand how many pieces of equipment come through grants and not our capital budget. So I think our fire department is probably one of our biggest hot buttons right now. Capital costs the tanker truck. That will probably be on our fall, our Springtown meeting. It's way past due for a replacement, but we did send it to the shop, so we're hoping to eke that out. And we do have another, I think engine one needs to be replaced as well. Unfortunately, we're in a bad cycle. This sounds funny, we're in a bad cycle, but all of our vehicles are almost 30 years old. They were all purchased at the same time, and they were not all purchased as new vehicles because we had to buy vehicles that would fit into our old fire station. And then we had to retrofit them to actually get them in the building. So now that we have a public safety building, we slowed down the pace a little bit, I think, of replacing vehicles, but now we're at that point. So our other big looming issue, I think, will be the Gloucester sewer upgrade. So that's coming. It will be a $6 million bill to Essex, about $300,000 over 20 years. And there are going to be different ways that we are going to fund that, but it's not a bonding situation. It is an actual $300,000 bill each year. So we are under discussions in town on how we're going to handle that.
Jody, may I just ask, the tanker truck, that's the one that there's only like 5 in the whole state, and we helped with all the recent fires that we are helping multiple towns.
Correct.
Yep.
So there are 5 tankers in eastern Massachusetts.
Eastern Mass, sorry, excuse me.
And my suggestion was that we applied for grant 2 years running and we did not get the grant. I think we're pretty shocked that we didn't get the grant. And I think we need to start going up the ladder, no pun intended here, but to see if we can get some help from the state. Just the recent fires, the mutual aid there, I think they are now proclaimed a state of emergency, so we'll get reimbursed. But we're paying for all of those hours out of our budget to help other towns in particular because we have a tanker truck. So with only 1 in 5 in eastern Massachusetts, it seems a tough ask to have 1,200 households pay for the $500,000 piece of equipment when it truly services many communities. But I don't know what kind of traction we'll get on that.
We don't have a tanker, Greg?
No, we don't have a tanker specifically. Both the engine and the ladder have a tank on them, but not as large as a standalone tanker.
Yeah, I think that the Manchester operating budget, I'm assuming, Greg, that we're gonna come in around the 2.5% piece for operating.
Yeah, certainly that's the goal, not to go over that. One of the drivers that'll be for Essex as well as health insurance, that's looking like we're returning back to double-digit increases for health insurance. So that's always a challenge. And then certainly our utilities, just the cost of chemicals have just skyrocketed. So water and sewer utilities, but that's covered by the fees we charge, but nonetheless, people feel that out of their left pocket versus their right pocket, but it's all part of the pockets that people have. So that'll put some pressure on them. And again, similar to many communities, it's really capital and facility planning and trying to keep up with the old pipes that keep breaking. So when you have pipes that are 133 years old, they like to break. So I would say those are the 3 things that come to mind as sort of the forefront for us, and certainly capital being kind of in a league of its own as we look at some of those numbers are pretty daunting in the years ahead, and trying to come up with a plan that spaces it out and allows us to do some bonding that doesn't overburden taxpayers.
Yeah, I think we're working on a 25-year plan and we have $250 million worth of capital expenses to cover.
250 million of capital expenses to spread out over 25 years.
Yeah. We have,
It's a good divider, at least.
we have the PFAS treatment, which requires us perhaps to build, we know we have to build a new building at Lincoln Street Well. The question is, do we also have to build one at Gravelly Pond, because we have two components to our system. We're looking at a new DPW, building, since they don't really have a building right now. Their equipment sits outside all year.
Dredging.
Dredging, yeah, we spend millions on dredging, and that's one of the sides of relief when we pass the MBTA zoning, because without complying with that, we would have no grants for dredging. And usually we get 50% for dredging. It's, How
Sewer
much is-
sewer treatment plant
Yeah.
eventually is
always
on
in
the
the
horizon.
floodplain.
Right.
That's a little concerning.
Yeah, and our, police and fire stations flood at high tides.
Yeah, I think the last time we were here, you said to me, the first time we met, you said, boy, you have that expensive public safety building. And the second time we met, you said, you were so smart to build that public safety building because our fire
Right.
department flooded, the police department and the town hall flooded. So,
Yep.
you know, be careful what you wish for, right?
Did you get that again this weekend, past weekend with the tides?
It did come into the parking lot, it didn't get
Close,
into the
okay.
buildings, but the whole, it comes up the boat ramp.
Uh,
And all the whole area behind the Legion floods,
Right.
you know, and
Probably,
it's,
probably okay on the peak tides and the April tides and all that. It's when the velocity of the water is moving with the storm.
Storm surge.
So it's, you have a high tide and then you have water being shoved through Salem Bay and then it just kind of piles up in this harbor and comes up and up and up.
I think it was
That's
in
brutal.
January of 2015, we had a snowstorm and everyone has to get their cars off the streets. So everyone on my street parked in the town lot, and every single car in the town lot was totaled
Oh.
because the water and
mm,
ice came.
Right.
There were icebergs in the parking lot.
Yeah.
So I think that's the worst we've had, but sometimes they'll put signs out at the entrance to the town lot and say, you know, king tide or
Right.
something, you know, it's gonna flood.
So addressing that is in the 250 million?
No, actually, 250 million is mostly facilities. It doesn't include climate resiliency, really. And we have to do something to the sewer plant to create berms around it or
Mm,
move it, or we don't know.
Theoretic plan is to, I guess, harden it.
Yeah.
We can talk more about this, but moving it is even more crazy.
I think I read that in the minutes that,
And we've looked at alternatives to go to other towns
it's-
and, but it's not workable. I mean, it's doing pipelines underwater and it's just like, and they don't have capacity.
It's like 70 million to
Right.
relocate it, is what we're assuming.
and what's your estimate to build a wall?
I don't know.
We
I mean,
don't, no, we're projecting 45 million for resiliency projects, seawalls and culverts.
How much?
25, no, 45. 45 million. 30 million for public safety building and town hall rehab. DPW garage is 22 million, PFAs and dredging is 23 million. And water and sewer upgrades at 7.5 million. We have only two-thirds of the houses in Manchester are on the sewer. All of those are Title V,
Okay, so we're,
on the coastline.
right, well, we have 1,200 households and we have 847 sewer betterments. And
It's about the same
It's
percentage.
about the same.
so it's about the same,
Yeah,
I would have guessed it was less. That's very interesting.
well, the densities downtown, so.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And 600 and, I think, 650 are connected. So. Like Manchester, we're holding to 2.5%, and we've been funding at 2.5% or less.
Yep.
And mainly less, to meet the school budget, for the last 3 years, maybe 4.
Yeah, I mean, it's been less than
Yeah.
2%, in terms of town services, to accommodate the apportionment of the school budget. And then also, we've had a little bit of amnesty in terms of things like the insurance, as
Right.
Greg was referencing, but, so we have to shoestring things to accommodate the school primarily.
And
Yeah.
we've concluded all of our union contracts, right, Greg? We did police, right?
Yes, so we have another year on them before we have to,
Okay. Yeah, so we don't have any contracts coming up this year.
Unfortunately, we have two. You win some and you lose some.
So I think, one of the questions that kind of comes across our mind sometimes is, are there any collaboration opportunities, between the towns, either for services or equipment and infrastructure? Like you talk about a tanker, is that opportunity for collaboration? And I don't know if there's any services that are an opportunity for collaboration or not.
Yeah, I think the differences in our services is really that the services that you speak of, Council on Aging, you have a full-time director, we have a part-time director. We have a building, but it's a very small building. We don't have transportation for them right now. We do have two other part-time employees, but other than that, our volunteers put as many hours in as our paid employees for our Council on Aging. Our harbor master is part-time with two part-time assistants, but in general, they're not even able to fill all the shifts in the summer. We have a full-time clam warden and we have two part-time assistants. Trying to think what else, you have a full-time fire department, we have an on-call fire department. And I think we're just fighting the full-time fire department because we know it's gonna be a minimum of $1 million on our 10,000.
Yeah, and we're really happy because, our new fire chief, who is a call firefighter in Essex.
You have our Jake, yes.
Has been, very good at reinstituting our call firefighter force because the last fire chief eliminated it because he said he couldn't get people. And so Jake has done a good job of, it's not big. It's like 6 people. maybe,
But it's helpful.
It's hugely helpful.
Yeah. I think particularly with all of these forest fires and stuff, it's just given us
Mhm.
more personnel to
I
make
mean,
it.
maybe one way to think about collaboration is people, but equipment. And I wonder if there's things on our capital budget, things we're doing with equipment, rolling stock, that sort of thing, and things that you're duplicating and doubling up on that maybe would work. And sometimes that's easier because equipment doesn't talk. It just is,
Yeah. It just
You
is.
go from there. But I don't know, it just seems like there's so many shared needs. And, like so much of New England, everybody's duplicating things, sometimes only a mile apart, which is crazy.
Yeah,
if we
well,
could-
we're both using regional 911.
Yep.
But we each have a ladder truck.
But we each have a ladder truck. Well, you have a bigger ladder truck.
We have a brand new one.
We do too, but yours is bigger.
Oh, okay. It's very pretty.
It is very pretty. I know what that price tag was. We couldn't afford that one, but we have a really nice ladder truck. But, our departments are small and the equipment is incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
But we roll like whatever engine 1 or engine 2 rolls at every call for us. So, some of these things are critically important and the tanker in Essex is critically important
Right.
because a third of the people don't have fire hydrants.
Yep.
So it truly affects Essex, even from an insurance standpoint for our residents. If we don't have a tanker truck, we have a twofold problem.
But it is a solid concept. We do share some equipment with Rockport, some of these specialized pieces of equipment. So maybe the follow-up is the next specialized piece of equipment. We see if there's enough capacity to share it.
Absolutely.
I think we share that specialized crane that cleans out the gutters.
The gutters,
the-
yep.
the drains in the
Right.
spring. So again, if it's gonna sit in a warehouse for, 10 months a year,
Exactly.
you might as well leverage the fixed costs.
So I think I think we should take our inventories and compare our inventories at a minimum.
Yeah.
To see, I know we have an inventory of all of our equipment, the age of the equipment, and you do too, for Maya, you need it for insurance anyway, but,
Yeah.
you know, start there. Oh, and we also have our police chief is retiring, so, you know, we're in the search for a new police chief at this point, so. But
Jody, do we have an update on that with the tanker truck? Are we gonna be able to baby that for a couple of years? I know that's sort of like on the crosshair, or it's on the radar screen, right?
So we limped it up to Methuen yesterday, and they didn't call and tell me they didn't make it, and they needed a ride, so I assumed that it made it. Those were Ernie's words. So it is in Methuen to be diagnosed, and they're hoping that they can get enough parts to repair it. Again, the issue beyond money is that it's a 30-year-old tanker, and some of the parts they just can't get. So we're waiting to hear that. Ernie, when I spoke to Ernie, we discussed, you know, what he thought the price tag would be for reasonable repair. And he thought $10,000, which is why we added 10,000 to the budget, so.
Let me call on Dean Nahadas. He has his hand raised. Dean?
Hi, Sarah, thanks. One thought I had on sharing equipment, like it seemed a little unnerving that we both bought brand new fire trucks, ladder trucks. You know, down the road, like if you guys are committed to buying a tanker truck, and I think we are looking down the road, our next concern is a pumper truck. So like you wouldn't need to look at a pumper truck as well, you know. It's something like, how often do both towns need a ladder truck simultaneously? With the shared services, you know, those are some of the types of things that we might be able to face, I'm thinking.
I know, we talked about that, Ramey and I talked about that when we met with the fire chief. And one of the concerns was sort of end to end on towns for emergency equipment. How that affects service. Also, that piece of equipment we shared with Rockport is that no longer has happened. We actually bought our own. So, but
In the past, we have,
we had to buy a new one.
but in the past, we have shared.
We shared it, and then Rockport bought their own. We bought their old one, and then it died and we bought our own.
Mm.
And our fire engines, are pumpers. So,
All your fire engines are pumpers. You only have one probably.
we have engine 1 and engine 2.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know,
We have
I don't know what we have right now.
We just
I
have a
don't-
ladder truck and an engine.
Correct. Yeah, the
And-
engines.
Squad, I think we have
Or
engine,
squad.
squad,
An ambulance.
We have 2 ambulances. They
No.
seem to grow regularly. No, never mind.
well, ambulances are your ambulances self-funding? Ours
I
are.
mean, we do ALS, so we do a lot
Self-funding
of
is,
mutual aid calls for the ALS.
Okay,
Because we don't use a private vendor except on a very rare
right,
occasion.
but they're not
Okay.
self-funding. It
Yeah.
takes a little bit of the dent out of the cost,
Yeah.
but the cost is significant.
I mean, you gotta remember that all of our firefighters are required to be paramedics,
right.
because of the ALS service, and, they're all full-time.
I mean, there is a divide here. I mean, I think Manchester is sort of an outlier amongst the state. I mean, we are as close to a contract career fire department as you can get for a small town. Our model is sort of what you would have in a municipality like Lynn or Boston or Springfield,
Mhm.
literally. And at the other end of the spectrum, you've achieved this thing of a call firefighting department like Byfield, you know, which so currently we're pretty far apart on that. But again, that's why I say start with equipment.
Right.
And then over time, maybe we can communicate our way towards some middle ground here that, yeah, there's a response issue, but you know, down the road, in 5 years, 10 years, how do we work something where we can collaborate more on this stuff? And
And I think that of course, the majority of our service calls are for medical.
Right.
Right.
So it's really all of the firefighting equipment that you don't use that often. Now, we have our ladder truck is an ALS equipped piece of equipment now.
Yeah.
And, the squad is,
Squad is, yeah,
and,
ambulance.
and the ambulance. But we'll be getting a second ambulance.
Mhm.
So Sarah, for the 250 million over 25 years, is that something you all are still trying to assess if it's nicely 10 million a year? Or are there certain things in these next 2 years that you see as big?
Well, our challenge is, over the next 3 years.
Oh, okay.
Our challenge is the potential impact on the tax rate for the next 3 years. After that, it seems to moderate, and one of our issues is assuming that Essex Elementary would kick in fiscal year 29. And that's a year where we think the capital will raise the tax rate to 4.9%. So if that were delayed a year, our fiscal year 30 looks much better.
Mm.
But our fiscal year 28 is really bad, and 27, 28, and 29 are all outside of the Prop 2.5, and it's, you know, part of is PFAs. Do you get hit with PFAs or not? You don't have an issue complying with the new federal regs?
In what way?
Well, they've dropped down the percentage you can have of PFAs in your water supply.
We,
So it's almost negligible, so we
Yep.
have to put in additional treatment. And our problem is the treatment itself is not that bad, but I don't know, are they in vats or whatever the
The equipment.
equipment they're in
So,
is too big for our buildings.
so we just redid our water plant. We're just coming to the end of that stage of,
So maybe you're already treating for PFAS?
so I think that we must be
Maybe.
complying. We're in the middle of the well project right now, so we must be there.
Yeah,
You know, they dropped Greg can speak to this, but they dropped the level from, was it like 20 parts per billion or something down to under 10. We were hovering around acceptability. And then once they dropped the regs, the EPA, we went out of compliance real
and
fast.
they're in effect in
Um,
2 or 3 years from now.
and you're referring to PFAS.
PFAS,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Forever plastics, basically.
Yeah,
And we're dealing with it on 2 sites, so a Lincoln Street well and then also Gravelly Pond. So
We were discussing that in another context at our last meeting.
we were thinking it'd be great to join the whole effort, but it's almost makes sense to do it separately.
for
So it's
redundancy.
expensive.
Mm. Yeah, no, I think our water plant and our wells are coming up to snuff. We just, we are using our ARPA money, leftover ARPA money, and then we just appropriated $259,000 to match that ARPA money to get through our well project. So we had been out to bid several times and without success, and we finally got there in this last round by modifying the scope. So I'm not hearing that there's a problem with the water department, but maybe they didn't want to tell me.
You'll find out.
Like the tanker truck.
Greg, when do we have to comply with the new PFAS regulations?
I believe it's 5 years from now is the deadline.
Okay. So you might not have heard about it yet.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it.
Yeah, the last time I'd heard that the Essex wells did not have PFAS in the water. So I think.
Okay,
I just got the tanker truck somewhere. I was happy. I was gonna sleep tonight.
Yeah.
Sarah,
he said you don't have a problem.
yeah,
You have 5 years.
we're fine. Plenty of time. We're planners.
Any other thoughts, Greg? And collaboration or anything?
Well, I mean, it's always worth, anytime there's a change in personnel, it's worth looking at whether or not there's a way to merge those operations or not. I think that's always a good conversation to have. It's not always easy, but it's always worth being on the lookout for those opportunities. So it's it's one of those things that in theory sounds really good, but the devil's always in the detail, right? And so that's always the challenge.
And I don't disagree. I can remember having this conversation with Pete Silva before he became police chief. And he asked me what I thought about him applying. And I said, well, I think the only thing I'm going to tell you is better be open to regionalization of something. And that's how we got to regional 911, but I think that the police model too, you work under a little bit different police model than we work under also. So you run three man shifts. We run two. I don't know if you're on a 4 and you're on a 4 and 2. So, there are differences and
I think we have a lieutenant.
Right.
Which you may not have.
we do.
Oh, you have a lieutenant?
I thought
A
we
second in
had,
command?
yeah, I thought that was Danny
We have-
Bruce is a sergeant, right? Or,
Yeah, you're right, there's sergeant.
so it's the chief and then
There's
there's
one, yeah,
a sergeant. Hopefully I'm not diminishing his title.
yeah. You're right, no lieutenant, sergeants, we have sergeants.
Yeah.
You have a ticket on your car tomorrow, Ben.
I don't know.
No, you-
They gotta
Standard
find
speed
him
limits.
first.
I know.
Yeah, because I would think that the police department wouldn't like me to say this, but I think that in our 2 towns, we don't have a huge number of police emergencies
Right,
per se.
Right.
correct.
It's
Yeah.
more community policing and driving around and so that is a department that's
Prevention,
easier to
basically.
consider
Ours-
regionalization than.
Ours is a little different, our policing, and I can remember my brother always telling me this because he worked part-time for Essex, is that we're the highway between Lawrence and Gloucester. 133
okay,
is
yeah.
the highway, so
The drug
your-
route.
your stops are different
Yep.
than in Manchester.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different.
I know we're dealing with 128 in 2 places on a regular basis, and
Oh, yeah.
tends to be fairly defined. It's not high variability. It's pretty much when you go, you know what you're gonna see.
Exactly. So in Essex, when you're pulling someone over in 133, you don't always know what you're gonna say. So we do have 3 sergeants,
Okay.
no lieutenant.
Quick question. So this is not so much on collaboration, but on capital
Yeah.
items. So you've done the mapping, it sounds like.
We're
in
working
terms
on
of
it.
the debt stack over time,
Yep.
in terms of all of these needs and how you stage them, which
Yep.
is something that we've been trying to work through
That's
too.
a big project this fall,
Okay.
that we're really trying to get. We had a facilities plan done. So we know what needs to be done. We have an issue of lack of land on which to build.
Hmm.
And such a large portion of our town building, municipal buildings are in flood zone.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't really have land. I mean, everyone wants to be downtown,
Right.
which floods. And we don't really have land outside of downtown. I mean, now we're looking at putting the DPW out, at our old compost site, which is on School Street on your side of 128.
Right.
So we're looking at near Atwater.
Mhm.
We're looking at that,
Trying to better utilize Pleasant Street for other
Right.
things.
our DPW is on Pleasant Street and we don't know what that will be used for long-term. We also need housing. Affordable housing, and we don't have any, we're trying to rehab the public housing in town, but to do that, make it self-sustaining, you need to have market rate units to give you the cash flow to
Right.
afford the subsidization,
Mm.
so,
And we essentially have lots of moving pieces, places they might go, lots of options that have been put together in a plan, haven't dealt with any of the politics on it yet. So it's basically a lot of options but it hasn't been condensed down over time with diligence to figure out what's gonna happen. And we have rough placeholders on money for what we think this is gonna be, but we know we need to do it.
And we
So,
always have issues come up regarding fields.
Yeah.
Right.
So we have Sweeney Field, which is in a wetlands.
natural and
Oh.
wet
Right.
and slow recovery.
Greatest splashing.
So you're looking at a police, fire, public safety building? Is that what you're looking to do, what we did?
Yeah, I
And,
mean, that's certainly one thing being considered.
right, and you would want to keep that, and I think that needs to be in a certain circumference from the center of your town, right?
Ideally, yeah.
And
That
not in a
was-
floodplain.
And not in a floodplain. That's
Floodplain,
that's
Yeah.
a little tough here.
right,
Yeah, or do, think outside the box and see what's
right.
available of, sharing public safety buildings or something, having small one in Manchester and
Right.
big one in Essex or something that's already built, that sort of thing.
Mm.
Of course, our police station's in this building, in
Right,
the basement,
Yes.
Downstairs, yeah.
and our fire station is on Lower School Street with,
Sawmill
buildings all
Road.
around it, and it's
Oh, right.
on Sawmill Brook. And it's the, I wanna call it a retention pond, that's probably not accurate, but that comes in from the ocean.
Right.
And we're
There's a lot.
rebuilding the culvert that runs from the ocean into that retention pond and having to do remediation there to have it absorb more water because, Sawmill Brook comes through town and floods.
is there a
houses.
lock on that? Or not? You can't,
Yeah,
there
There
is,
is.
there?
yeah.
Yeah, but the problem is when
Because-
it rains like crazy, though, it's the freshwater problem, not the saltwater problem.
Saltwater problem. Yeah.
It all flows downhill and back, so.
They open it, in the spring for the spawning. We have one of the few, cold water fisheries in the state. Up, goes up Sawmill Brook and it's up, next to the wilderness area. Up there on, Upper School Street.
Yeah.
But it's a cold water fishery, so we have to open the gates to let the fish come in to spawn.
What kind of fish?
Trout,
Trout?
yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating. I didn't know that.
Well, we found that out when we were dealing with the 40B project, because it's right there.
Oh, those little animals and
Come out of the woodwork.
So how do you think that the MBTA zoning is going to affect your student headcount?
So we did a fiscal analysis on that, and RKG, which is a well-respected consultant, did a financial feasibility study, and they determined, based on the areas we selected, a total of 34 new units in downtown area. Spread over Lord knows how many years.
Mhm.
And there's 100 unit parcel out at Beaver Dam Road, which is currently a mini storage area. And the sense is that that's not gonna be sold because the cash flow on mini storage is much higher than it is on residential. So we're projecting between 2 and 5 new students per year. And between 2020 and 2024, there are 172 fewer Manchester students in the school district. Plus the 80 school choice that are filling empty seats, right? So we made the determination that the MBTA zoning was not gonna cost us, in the school system area. Obviously, the apportionments can change a little based on, difference, but it's, the school district can absorb that small number. And we don't expect the development to be very fast,
Mm.
I'm sorry, Sarah, could you say those numbers again? You're expecting about 3 to 5 per year,
2 to 5.
2 to 5 for the next 10 years, 15 years?
We did it over 20 years.
20 years.
But that would be if it's fully built out, and we don't believe it will be fully built out.
Right.
The
That's from the
areas-
34 new units
Well,
in
We
downtown.
did it. The 134, which is the 34 downtown and the 100 outside, and then we did 252 which is absolute max build out under the model
Right.
of new units. And we don't feel that will happen because we selected areas, like we have Sawmill Circle, which is a high-end, it's apartments now, it was kind of built as
Right.
condos, that could theoretically hold 9 more units. That's not gonna happen. It's too new, nobody's gonna, and we have, you know, condos at 21 Pine that could take some, it's not gonna happen, and Brook Street, so we picked areas with condos and we picked areas with very small lots.
But I didn't know, you know, 125 is, you're saying that's the student per year size, the 125
No,
number?
the amount of students that have, the decrease in enrollment from Manchester.
It was 107.
And she's saying it's not gonna offset it. It's not gonna, it's immaterial, is what
Right.
you're saying on
The
the impact
additional
of
students.
the enrollment.
Yeah.
So you were down 125.
172
hundred and seventy-two, but of
over
the,
4 years.
but of the
Okay,
hundred
over
and
4 years,
seventy-two,
okay.
where did they drop off? Did they drop off at graduation, or did they drop off
It was throughout.
between K through 12?
It was throughout.
So based on economy, and we've been here before, Maureen, you
Right.
know this, that when we started the district, we had few students from Manchester, like
Mhm.
50%, and then the economy tanked.
2012.
We
Yeah.
built a new school and then they all came back.
Right.
So, you know, that's what you've got to
But we
keep in the
don't,
back of your mind. But this is
We
what
don't
you're planning
have-
on.
we don't have that many school-age children.
Right.
And something like 35% of our population is over 60 or 65.
Huh.
And people come to Manchester and they stay. And the kids come through the school systems and then they're not in the school anymore and their children can't afford to buy in.
Do you know just offhand, just because obviously enrollment, because we have in Essex, housing units coming into, how well this, let's say the census is, because it's one thing if students are in and then they leave for whatever choice, whether family leave completely or if they go to a different school. But for the students that never actually enroll, like maybe they start at one of like North Shore Nursery School, they go to Gus, they go to wherever, but they actually never enroll. Is there a good
In-
sense of
In
that?
conjunction with the Essex Elementary School building, they did a study.
Okay.
And they looked at school-age children and based on different age brackets, how many kids you're expected to have, and they projected no increase in population over the next 10 years. Based on those assumptions. Yeah.
Which makes sense. I mean, it's a function of availability of
Yeah.
housing and affordability
Right.
of housing. It's really those two things. And, you know,
And there's fewer people in the country of childbearing age,
mhm,
you know.
right,
don't
there's
know.
not turnover that's happening to,
Well, when people didn't have
You know.
babies for a while,
you know,
or had fewer babies, so there's not
I
as many.
think also the issue is that the housing stock is really, really limited. It turns over, it goes quickly when available. It's so high price that basically the people who are buying it have options, other options for education. And
I have a house across the
Just-
street from me.
right,
Yeah, went on the market for 1.685 million, 2 bedrooms. And it went under contract within 2 or 3 weeks.
Hmm.
And you can't increase the number of bedrooms in it. Unless you tear it down and rebuild, but it's on a really small lot. I mean, it's crazy.
That is crazy.
But at one point, like using what you just said, you know, for the family that comes in who can afford the 1.7 million or something,
Right,
where they might never use the school.
Right.
Are we all able, not to belabor, because I've seen the report, I'm not on the building committee for Essex, so I haven't looked at it as closely, but are we all able to really account for that family? You know, is that sort of thing really being looked at? Because I guess that would be another piece of
But
it.
that was the study.
That
And
was the study?
And that would be from your census data.
Right.
That's what
Okay.
I'm saying. That's
Yeah,
how we
okay.
knew when we regionalized that only 50% of the school-age kids in Manchester were actually in the system, which is how we ended up with so many choice kids for
Right.
that period of time.
yeah.
So you
Some
knew
of-
about
some of
half
it
the
too
kids
is-
weren't using the school system, give or take, you knew
Mhm.
half.
And your point is that if you can afford that price tag, you can also afford
Private
the
private
check
school.
for a private school someplace
Right.
else,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
You also
The
have-
starter home of the just starting out
Yeah.
is not there.
Right, and we
Right.
saw a lot of that, certainly with COVID.
Yeah,
where the private schools started up more quickly than the public schools. And you
Yes.
had two parents working and
Yeah.
guess what they did? They popped their kids in the private schools and then didn't pull them out.
right,
Right.
right.
Because
I
they
think
couldn't be
also
home to
it's-
educate them.
And some of the real estate transitions are also second homes for people. So, you know,
They're not.
they've got a
family
structure
age.
sitting here and they're
Yeah.
paying for it, but their kids or wherever are on the other side of Boston.
We
or-
call that the sweet spot, right? I mean,
It's nice, yeah.
It's nice. I mean, that, you know, Rockport has that, Nantucket has that, Martha's Vineyard. I mean, you know, we don't have that in Essex. We have educate and evacuate because they can still afford a house in Essex
Yeah.
for a period of time. And then when the kids are,
Educate and evacuate.
I think that may be changing.
But that, I would
Jody.
agree
I-
with that.
It-
yeah.
It's trend,
I
it's
think
trend,
it-
we're a step behind, but that trend is,
it's,
It's
it was
happening.
referenced at town meeting,
yep,
you know, the same thing you said, Sarah. Across the street from me, the house just went for 1.5, you know, and, you know, there's very few. It's getting to that point. The demand for the North Shore living is
Whole
always
re-
been there,
whole
but it's
region.
accelerating.
And
Yeah.
people want to be
Gloucester,
on the
Rockport
ocean.
are all seeing
Mhm.
this, Ipswich.
but if you want Manchester Essex School District,
Yep.
you're more likely to
Go to Essex.
go to Essex if you
Right.
can't afford the Manchester.
Right,
price.
all things being equal.
Yeah.
Right, so.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we do get the turnover because it's for some people, it's a stretch, but it's worth it because they want to be in the school district.
Right.
So. Okay. So you're hoping to hold out for fiscal year 30 for Essex Elementary School, although I'm not sure that.
Yeah.
That's probably where we're gonna land based on,
Well,
Some of the
I think-
documentation.
I think one of the questions is, can the school district do like bands for a year or something like that to spread, to delay
I mean, we
the
prefer,
higher amount of.
we prefer fiscal 30 also,
Yeah,
but we're targeting for 29.
yeah,
I mean, it's
From a
sort of
planning
wishful
standpoint.
thinking, but we've been looking at this for almost 7, 8, 9 years. And thinking that frankly, 2032 would be ideal. And the reason for that is that our unfunded liabilities, OPEB, roll off theoretically at that time.
That's
Debt
a
on the
big
high
mention.
school, debt on the high school rolls off on that time. So we're not coming before residents saying we are trying to pay for 3 schools simultaneously.
Correct.
And that's that's a challenge, we think.
But, and I know we have people on, we can't change the timing, right? Like with the process,
With SBA funding.
right, like we're not able to now say, we'd like.
you can change the timing of when you start paying for the bonds, including repayment of principal. So you can use the bands
Okay,
in the early, usually during your construction, you're using a band, so you're only paying interest.
Mhm.
Mm,
And so,
just bridge
yeah,
to a
Basically
slight,
bridge
a
funding through
couple
construction.
of
because I
years.
thought, I guess I was
Take on the
thinking,
long term
and
debt.
again, I do know people are on the call, I thought fiscal year 28 was where they, or 29
29 is where
to start,
we're expecting the payment on the bonds to kick in.
yeah, like the school would be opened in fiscal 28 or
Well, the
29.
construction would be completed. yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
We're, a lot of what you said is similar. The OPEB thing, we're really trying to get that liability off the books by 29. So, because our thinking here is that, and this is a topic that's near and dear to Mike's.
I've been
Hard.
playing that tune for 7 years.
But then that would free up money in terms of the Essex Elementary
Right.
for us. But it's still gonna be a little bit tight for obviously because of this, for the same, because of the middle high
Right.
debt roll off. That'll,
right,
Lighten
that's
things
another
up.
few years after
Yeah.
that, yeah.
this is helpful.
Jake, did you have something to add? Okay. Well, Jake knows this process too, so.
Should we see if Pam wants to add anything or if she's on?
I'm
Yeah.
here if you have any questions.
Not so much a question, but if you, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but.
No problem.
Yeah, I
No
just
problem.
wanted to make sure you didn't hear anything that sounded off from the dialogue in terms of the timing around Essex Elementary and the,
Yep. At this point, it looks like the vote for a full schematic proposal would land in front of voters somewhere either fall 26 or spring 27. Latest potential would be fall 27. So then I think it was Sarah who mentioned it. It's all going to be how we work the financing in terms of kind of pushing out your large payments.
Right.
So, yeah, and I think that's what Nina was referring to. The timeline for moving through the MSBA process is locked unless, you know, we can't hit a benchmark through a vote or something like that.
But we could draw it out with bands to get us to 2032 potentially, Pam?
I wouldn't say I'm expert in designing long-term financing, but that has been part of the discussion as to how it could be managed. But that's what we would do collectively. When we did Memorial School, we did like a modified collaboration group where we had reps from the boards, finance committees, worked with Avi, got on the phone with Hilltop, and kind of worked through how it would be in everyone's best interest.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
Of course. And
Might
I would
be-
encourage everybody, well, my mic's open, to look at that enrollment projection report. It does give you some good information about what they're seeing based on their methodology for study. They're projecting the design enrollment for Essex Elementary to be around 250. So that would be a slight increase over the next few years for that building.
Pam, is that because we're going to be able to roll back some of those students that we've had to move back to over to Memorial because of accessibility currently at Essex?
That could account for maybe 8 or 10 students, but
Okay.
it's more what you're projecting for what the demographics look like and what the projection is for potential housing, I believe.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, I think Essex is in the same boat from a debt schedule standpoint. 2032 would be ideal, but we're working on the assumption.
Since you asked me to speak, I'll chime in there just to remind everybody that 2034 is the half-life of the middle high school. So we're including in our planning that we'll need a significant renovation project at that point in time to address the currency of the facilities in the building.
We talked about this like 2 years ago when we were looking at funding and debt for Memorial High School, Essex Elementary. And it became obvious that we're going to be thinking about building a school like on and on and on. It'll never be done. You know, and unfortunately, if you're looking at 3, one is hitting the end of its life when you're thinking about another. It's, you know, if you were thinking about 4, it would be even more of a case. If you think about 2, it would be less, but you know, these buildings last so long, and so.
I don't know why houses last so much longer than schools.
Wear and tear.
Yeah.
So if I could just jump in for a minute, Sarah.
Sure.
And maybe ask Pam to verify, but I'm assuming that the enrollment patterns are continuing with the shift towards Essex continuing? Or do we see that
I think it's stabilizing.
it is stable?
I can pull up our latest enrollment numbers were posted a couple of weeks ago, and they'll be in our budget materials. But I don't think recall seeing any major shifts. It's not in a correction phase where Manchester is starting to grow again. It seems to just be flatlining. And a few heads here and there aren't going to change the formula too much in any given year.
So when it flatlines, then there's not that extra burden on Essex, is that?
Well, it's funny because we were talking a little bit about that the other day. I think as I'm thinking through this, we're going to flatline on the split as well from a common sense perspective until the time at which Manchester grows again. Because really, the shift that has occurred is that it's been a decline to Manchester, not a growth for Essex. So really what you're doing, what's happening is, as your student population is declining, you become more equal shares of the entire district. So until the Manchester number grows again and grabs back a larger portion of the total population, I think it's going to flatline right around where it is. But I think Michelle's learning the process. I don't know if she has any early observations on that. And I certainly don't want to put her on the spot if she hasn't had time to dig in.
Michelle Cresta?
Yeah,
Yeah, not yet with the enrollment piece,
okay.
but yeah, we're getting there.
I can speak to that just a little bit because Pam and Michelle, when you had sent over those preliminary enrollment numbers in October, I kind of ran it through the meat grinder of apportionment because I wanted to get an early read on how bad or less bad it would be for Essex. It's exactly right. I mean, what Pam was saying there was less of a decline in Manchester. And there was also a slight decline in Essex, but it moderated. So the extreme disparity between Manchester and Essex in terms of the impact of apportionment on the percentage increase number is better this year, mercifully.
And what
So-
were your numbers you did?
No, what I was saying is that, so the apportionment spreadsheet that we've used, you know, and you just tick it each year, it's the enrollment, it's the EQB,
Yep.
it's the census.
Yep.
And the EQB, we don't know.
Right.
So I just sort of adjusted that to be a consistent ratio.
And that
and
changes this year, right?
It will change, right,
Yes,
which
it's
is
even
why.
years. Yeah.
But the enrollment number, since it's a, 3-year moving average, once you have those preliminary enrollment numbers, you can plug those in and get a sense of. So if the local assessment was 2.5%, just as an example, it would be 2.09 for Manchester and 3.18 for Essex by my math. So 3% would be 2.58 and 3.69. And then I did it for 3.25, which would be 2.83 and 3.94. So the point, it's about a 1% spread between the two towns.
Yep.
Which we've had 3% and 4% spreads in the past. So I was like, okay, well, that's a relief that, so wherever the number comes, if it's, in the 2.5 to 3.25, it's going to be somewhere in the 2s for Manchester and somewhere in the 3s for Essex, at least based on all things being equal, based on the enrollment numbers.
But at 2.5, it's 2.09 and 3.18. I know these are very rough.
Because I have no
Yeah.
idea what the relative change in equalized valuation is.
Right, and that might completely change it for all we
Right,
know.
yeah.
I mean, that's the risk here. So this is not, this was more for planning purposes to see, like, are we gonna be, our back's gonna be against the wall and this was good news because, until there's like a structural reversal in terms of what's been happening or just a flatlining to Pam's point, it's hard to know where it's gonna actually like equalize out between the two towns, but hopefully we're closer.
And the driver, Ben, is the acceleration in the Manchester student fall off.
Well, it's been decelerating.
It's
So, because it had been
It's-
like
it's
really,
not-
it had really dropped off,
Right.
particularly during COVID and like
So it's the curve.
following.
Yep.
And that started to flatline out, whereas Essex has sort of been kind of bouncing around, sort of stable.
Right.
So,
Yeah, no, we had some attrition, I think it was last year, or the year before, in the middle school. There was a large group who exited from Essex, so
When they were getting ready for high school, going to high school.
so when does equalized valuation, when will we get that number? Where does that come out of?
isn't that the beginning of the year? I think we get that.
That's through the whole assessment, the
Usually,
assessment.
usually in February.
February. And what year
End
is
of
that
January,
for,
February.
Pam?
Oh, boy, this is a quiz.
Sorry,
No, it's, we wait for, is it the DOR to publish the latest, and then Avi and now Michelle will factor it on that. So I can go back and look through my notes and I'll know exactly kind of when we do it each year. But he
so it's
always
the,
waits for a state publication to draw from.
yeah, so it's, we determine our tax rate.
Okay,
The
so
end of
that's.
December.
It's every
That's
two, it's every
DLS,
2
right.
years
2
though,
years.
like if you look at the, like,
Yeah.
it's level for 2
Yeah.
years and then it steps up and then 2 years. So this is an adjustment year.
So it must be,
Okay.
so that would be based on the values as of 12/31/2023.
22.
Yep.
But,
Don't they
Right.
average it over 2 years?
no, but the 24
Oh, right,
is from December 31st to 23.
23, yep.
Hmm.
That's when our tax rate calculated this year is off the 12/31 values, except for new growth, which is June 30th. This year.
So,
You don't
yeah,
get your new growth until June 30th?
No, when the assessor determines their valuations.
Yes.
They pick up any projects in process
Not partial.
as of June 30th.
Oh, you go through June 30th. Okay,
No, everyone does.
okay.
That's a
So
state thing.
we're getting our,
You do an estimate of new growth when you do your budget
yeah,
for revenue, but your actual
you're certified.
assessments are based on 12/31 for existing properties and then the next June 30th for new properties.
Okay.
Or additions and that sort of, right, Greg?
Yeah, yes, correct.
Say that right? I happen to know that because I was doing a very expensive addition and I got hit in June and I said, how come I'm hit in June? We just started in December.
Oh, that's fun. Personal experience, and
You
never
don't
better,
get it.
never better than personal experience. Okay. So we won't have those numbers. Okay. Nothing like another exciting year.
So that's kind of when they finalize the school budget, is when they have
they get the
the
final EQB.
final, yeah, final appropriation.
And the census is every 10 years, so
Right.
that's a
2020,
non-factor.
yeah.
Yeah. absolutely.
And as I'm thinking of it, I'm saying February because that's when we start to formally do the, pull together the apportionment formula for certification, and that's typically when he does the formal check of all of the numbers. So we do estimates until the adopted budget, then he does the formal certification.
I would think it would come out earlier.
If
Mm.
the
get
information
it
is based
certified.
on certain deadlines, can we at least get preliminary? Like, I think, it's nothing.
I don't think so.
Maybe so.
But I
Oh,
don't think it,
sorry,
I don't think it
gotcha.
hugely moves the needle in terms of the apportionment, just the way the formula actually works, which is why in the past, Avi's been able to do like, provide an apportionment number even with the
Yes.
preliminary budget that comes out in December. It's just not finalized. Yeah.
But we kind of know, like our assessor will have the assessment values when they have the meeting on December 4th to decide whether they're gonna do two different tax rates.
That is correct.
Okay. And so we'll have a sense as to what the difference is.
Yeah, that's why I
From
thought
2
we would
years
get
ago.
that number
Yeah.
earlier in December, because you certified new growth.
I think
comes in
it takes a while for
December.
the state to certify. I mean, but the state has to certify the taxes before the end of December,
Right,
so they can go out.
so,
So it's probably numbers are published in
coming.
December, yeah.
And I'm sorry if I'm making it more confusing. Post adoption of the budget, so second half of February, the preliminary numbers that we provide for the look at apportionment and assessment are finalized based on the final numbers in the budget because there are different details in the apportionment formula. So it's the formalization of all of the variables, which until that time are preliminary.
Right.
And then get formalized. So in my head, I am thinking about the time in which we sit down and formalize the variables in the apportionment formula and have it formally certified. So when they actually become available, maybe different than when we formalize them. So sorry if I confused. the
That's all right.
process.
That's all right.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Ben can do his calculations in December.
Well, we'll head down that number.
Well, it is kind of it is fun to see how close was I? That's the nerd.
Yeah,
That's
I
where
was
the
gonna
nerd
say,
comes
you're showing your true colors then.
out.
He gets excited, then he sends out a text, look what I've got. No. So exciting. All right, so
So how does those, excuse me, those numbers fit into your budgeting process?
Well, knowing whether we're dealing with 4% increase for the school versus a 3% versus a 5% is an indication of how draconian we have to be with the rest of the budget to be able to accommodate it, particularly in the absence of an override, which we know that experience from 2023. What happened in 2023 was, as part of the failed override, is we ended up using excess levy capacity that had been building up over prior years. So we were able to, squeeze as much as we could. So that's our maneuvering room was essentially used up in that 23 experience. So so then in terms of modeling out all of the operating budget and the line items, and I mean, I will say that if there's one thing that I've accomplished when I was chair of the finance committee in Essex was to beg Jody to take over after I left, because she's been turning over a lot of rocks in terms of finding potential opportunities and just asking a lot of questions. So I'm grateful for that. So I'm sure you're gonna save us.
I'm in the weeds. That's what he just said. I'm down in the weeds all the time, and that's what I told him. You stay up here and I'll deal with the
He's,
rocks.
meeting with all the town departments and then, so, so to try and make it happen.
That being said, though, I think we're still leaning toward the 2.5% because we've got some other issues brewing. So as tight as we can get to that, particularly going into a new building project, I think it will behoove us all to be incredibly conservative. I mean, we have been incredibly conservative in our town budget for the last few years. I mean, almost to a detriment in some cases. But I think looking at a building project coming, I think everybody's acutely aware that can't really go in with a big budget ask and a capital project.
Yeah, I mean, we were at 0% COVID first.
Hmm.
And then we were at, I think, 1.5, and then I think we were at 2, and then this past year we were at 2.5,
2.5.
a little over.
We've
right?
stayed under 1.8 1 year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's-
Our tax rate went up 4% this year because of the balance of the bonding on the memorial school.
Yeah.
Which had previously been approved.
Right. When do you get your healthcare numbers? Is that a timing issue? That is something we always
I
wrestle with.
think it's always between mid-January and February.
We've gotten indications of at least 10%. And our retirees was 21. So funding OPEB can't come soon enough.
If that-
We usually get a firm number on the health in mid-February. We get a range from Maya in end of January.
So let's all pray for under 10%. Where did we land last year? I don't remember.
The other one is where the school lands,
We landed at
where
like
when they get their data.
7 last year, 7 or 8.
Yeah, it was, the range was like 5.5 to 8.5 for all towns, and we were a little on the lower end, and I think Essex is at 6 or 7, I forget, one or the other.
Yeah, and the school was like 8, right?
Yeah, we
It was-
came in into high 7s. We started around 15 14 or 15.
Yep. Yeah, I think I
Um,
remember saying like 793 or something.
Yeah, it was right on the edge.
Yep.
We are not getting good early indicators. We're looking at potentially 3 times our landing number from last year for starters.
3 times.
Over 20%?
About 20%, 21%. Initial was 18 and it went up from there. It's early. It may be the year we consider going out to bid, but it doesn't sound like it's good any place. So we'll keep working it like we always do.
Wow.
If you went out to bid, Pam, you'd have to do that soon, correct?
Be January or February.
When Pam was the last time going out to bid, just out of curiosity?
I want to say it was around 2016.
Oh, it's been a long time. Usually you get hit in the 4th year of your cycle. First year's great, second year's third year's about where you thought you were gonna be, and then they get you on the 4th year.
But I
So,
think COVID skewed that.
yeah.
It did, and we made some significant changes in plan design to help reduce the cost.
With the number as high, and I know obviously you have to have a place mark, is this gonna be different where, let's hope the number just comes down to anything, but let's hope it comes down even to 10? That's not savings, that's just the real number then is 10? When it's that drastic of a number, because I know last year it was referred to that there was savings from having the benchmark being at the 14 or 15, and then when it came in lower, instead of that money being returned or just really not used, because it wasn't,
Mhm.
it was seen as that we can now use this amount for something else. So
I am going to defer to after we have some school committee conversations at the beginning of December when they get to see the actual budget and think about how they want to frame some things.
Okay, so I think with the
Yeah.
number 20% or higher, that would be important.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a town perspective, I think we would hope that then the budget just got reduced by the amount of the reduction in the healthcare number.
I hear that. I think there are some members on if they'd like to speak to it at all.
I mean, that's how we handle it in town. We don't say that we have a savings, we're gonna spend it somewhere else. We reduce our budget and when we move on. So, I mean, I think that should be something that we really need to think about. Jake?
I'll just say one thing and Pam can correct me, but it's not from the last conversation we had, at the last meeting. It sounds like we want to kind of look holistically at what the district is looking for and what the options are. So the first number will probably look high. But know that our approach this year is to try to look holistically so we can see how, where we need to reduce, and the healthcare is certainly one of those things that'll force us to look at program. Where we can look at that in strategic ways. But in order to do that, we need to kind of look holistically, which is gonna put out, the first number may be high, but knowing that we need to get that down, we kind of need to do that strategically. So all I'm saying is prepare for a high number to begin with, but know that we are, planning to look at that.
We used to see a lot of that, and that kind of upset us. That we kind of feel that you should come down a little before you release the first. To have your conversations before you release the first budget, so it's more.
I understand, I'm just conveying where the kind of sense of the committee is at the moment.
I think for the purpose of putting numbers on the table, I think we would start low from the town perspective, and the district is gonna start high. I wouldn't expect anything different.
One thing that might help is that I know we've shifted our town meeting by dates, and so I've been at this game long enough to remember like a school budget meeting like February 7th to February 12th with approval from the school committee and then town to vote, and then we would literally be writing like hours into the night our report to go to the press, to have a meeting like on the first Monday of April. They've pushed that out. So hopefully that schedule will allow for a little more realistic budgeting and not this we've put in a placeholder and Manchester's voted and then, oh gosh, we got it right or we didn't get it right. And then you roll along a couple weeks later. So I think we're a little more in sync right now, but
That
Timing
is,
is everything.
that is very helpful. Yeah, because that was a tough timeline.
We're the fourth, I think, fourth Wednesday in April now, fourth Monday. I think.
we've added about 3 weeks, right, Greg?
Is that right, Greg? We're the fourth Monday?
Fourth Monday, yes.
Yeah, that is helpful.
Yeah.
Because that was tight.
Instead of being, yeah.
Well, I think, Pam keeps reminding everybody when they talk about Essex Elementary, whether we do a rebuild or we do a renovation, if we do nothing, there are incredible capital costs just to keep that building going. So to keep everybody on the right track, I think it's important that we stay conservative to get there so that we can get the vote. Otherwise, we're going to be shoveling, good money after bad. When we did the walkthrough of the building, I mean, everything in that building, it's got some great bones, but, I think it was Andy's like, touching the ceiling. Oh, this is, we can't even go up here. There are windows, doors, the boiler, you name it. I laughed because I was looking at the 5-year capital plan for the middle high school, and it talks about replacing kitchen equipment. Half the kitchen equipment in Essex Elementary doesn't work. Our kids can only get in certain kind of lunches because the equipment, it's there, it's been there forever, and more than 50% of it doesn't work. And we're replacing it at the middle high school shiny building, and we're still, we're not replacing anything, hopefully at Essex, to get to that point. And
I think the other issue is given the significant decline in the school population, how much do you need in infrastructure to house those students? The memorial is, I think, with a capacity of 50 students more than what they have or something like that, and the middle and high school have excess capacity. So I think that's one of the things that's important to
Think about
yeah, and I think that we struggle with that is how much money do you spend on infrastructure if your population, the school population is going to keep declining?
That's been built into the feasibility, the scope of the feasibility study.
Okay.
And the enrollment report is the first step in that. In that present, they're projecting a design enrollment of 250 students for Essex Elementary, which would exceed the 100-student capacity at Memorial School to get us started. But they're going to look at everything, and they're going to look at potential changes to the Memorial School if necessary to create an expansion opportunity there. So the building committee has been charged with vetting those ideas.
Good. We like that.
What is the current enrollment of Essex Elementary?
232, 223,
To-
Pam, 223 in Essex or 232? Do I have my numbers backwards?
It's in the 220s.
Okay. All right.
And then we have a known development project between 30 and 36 homes, 4-bedroom homes.
And we're right around 289 at Memorial School with their design build at 530 or 535.
Oh,
I'm sorry, 335. Well,
oh, okay.
sorry. No. 335.
That's what I thought.
And it's at 289, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
So again, I mean, I'm gonna say it just because everyone knows that I say it. And I'll go back to my same thing. In the beginning, when we formed the region, Essex knew we would be last, and we waited 24 years for our school to have attention, and if there's gonna be a change in that, any type of structural change in facilities, it would also need to crack open the regional agreement because it's written that way. So.
So What else do we need to cover on this school budget?
Well, I have a few things I'd like to say
Okay.
about the school budget, but
Okay.
this is contextual, because I think it'll trigger some discussion, because we've been having conversations in terms of what do we expect the school budget to come in at this year. And we have talked about different numbers historically. We've in the past, we've talked about 3.5%. I think we all agree that's too high. We have seen, we have at times requested and pretty consistently 2.5%. And that has been the range historically between 2.5% and 3.5%. So I was curious, and I went into the DART database in DESE because I was curious. I had a few questions in my mind that I thought it might help answer. And I put together some data, but I'm happy to share it with anybody afterwards, but the font's too small and I'm not going to hand it out, but I'm just going to kind of go to the punchline here. Because what I was curious is how Manchester Essex ranks in Essex County on a bunch of different attributes. And the first question I was wondering about is enrollment decline. Like, we've seen this level of enrollment decline. And so I went back to 2014 and then I rolled it through 2023, or, the most recent enrollment numbers that get reported to DESE so that you can, have some way of benchmarking. And there's 29 districts in Essex County that are public school districts. So I didn't include charter schools. I didn't include, vocational, technical, just districts. Some of them are regional, and some of them are single town districts. And of those 29, the enrollment declines have ranged from as high as almost 30% in Rockport so of the 29, 25 have experienced enrollment declines, and only 4 have had enrollment increases. And yeah,
What were the increases, just to say who's bucking the trend?
yeah, I'll tell you, because this is interesting.
It's very.
What I did was I line item them from the steepest decline to the least amount of decline, which was actually an increase, which is Haverhill. So basically what you can,
Immigrants, yeah.
it's immigrants. So you can take the 29 and you can basically split it into the worst declines. And so like you can create like a median, right? And so those that experienced the most declines basically I was using English language learners as a data point on immigrant impact. And so there's very little in terms of those that experience the steepest declines. In terms of, so Manchester Essex is in that. When you look at the communities that are sort of either close to flatline or slightly up, so Haverhill's up, Lynn is up by 7%, Haverhill's up by 8.8. Boxford, interestingly, 1.3, and Beverly is flat, but bucked the trend. But you see, a huge increase in the percentage of students who are ELLs, English language learners. So I didn't feel like those were worthy comparisons. Those that either were flat or upward. I was more curious to say, okay, of those that are like Manchester Essex, what are some interesting factors here. So, and there's a lot of districts like Manchester Essex, Rockport, Masco, Triton, Amesbury, Marblehead, Pentucket, that are all greater than 15% decline in enrollment. So it's not unusual. What I was curious to see was, of those that have had more than 15% decline enrollments, what has been the expenditure growth over the last 8 years? And there's not as much correlation between expenditure growth and enrollment. First of all, no one had an expenditure decline. They were all
Oh, you're
either.
kidding.
It's a surprise.
No, they were all, like the whole 29 districts were between 1.5% and 5.5% average annual increases in expenditure. And so that if you just isolate those that had the level of enrollment decline as Manchester Essex, the average is 3.25% expenditure growth over the last 8 years, which I thought was interesting because Manchester Essex comes in at 3.26. So basically right at the average, and that's among communities that are, or districts that have had greater than 15% enrollment declines.
Did you say Rockport was the highest decline?
Yeah, Rockport is the highest in terms of decline, almost 30%.
That's over an 8-year period.
Yeah, from 2014-15 academic year up to the 23-24
So are they
academic
leaving on
year.
school choice?
I was just gonna.
That's
ask
what I
that
don't know.
question.
And by
Is
the way,
how
this
many
is-
of those are choice kids going out.
All this did was create more questions for me.
Sure,
By the way,
yeah.
this is like, I wasn't trying to seek any answers. I was
Yeah.
just kind of curious to see like,
Look at the.
how much is Manchester Essex kind of
In
in line with this cohort based on these enrollment declines? And
We're in line,
it's in line. That was basically the conclusion that I drew.
unfortunately.
And also I was curious about FTE count because ours has been pretty flat. And I realize it's sort of been shifting from general classroom to special education, which we know, but we've been pretty much flat. That's pretty much been true across the whole, you don't really see material declines in districts. They pretty much hold their staffing count, with the exception of those that are really growing at the bottom, which are the Haverhills and the Linns, where you definitely have seen some pretty steep increases in FTEs. So all I was trying to answer was the question of, if we asked for 2.5% budget growth versus 3 versus 3.5, like, is that unreasonable or reasonable based upon the cohort of that? That's what I was trying to figure out. And so 2.5 is definitely low. Out of those 29 districts, 6 of them have kept their expenditure growth below 3%. So, and again, Manchester Essex 3.26, and then, which is right about the average given the enrollment decline. So, I don't think 2.5% is unreasonable as a starting point. And I know that the school committee will probably, argue that. But I just when you look at the data, it's like there are districts that have managed to keep their budgets below 3%. There's a lot of qualitative nuance behind these numbers. So, in terms of the mix of different kinds of students. Oh, the other thing that I'll say is that students that are classified as high needs universally up across all the different districts. So that wasn't surprising because I had heard that. And in fact, across the state, it's up. So the fact that resources get shifted toward special ed makes sense to me in terms of the numbers.
Were you able to see anything about like number of AP courses that are offered in the various districts?
No, and actually, that is my single biggest question right now, because, if you have declining enrollment and your ratios start to change in terms of classroom size, then the trick is, how do you preserve the program?
Right.
And that's where the real sort of creativity comes in. And I didn't look into the program or, course options or availability
But certainly
sections,
We
because
have, I could send you a report from 2 years ago from the high school council on AP. If you want,
Yeah,
because the former principal did get that data for us,
Oh, okay.
so I'd be happy. to
Because it
send
just,
to her.
you know, I look at it from the sense that the more AP courses that are offered,
Yeah.
the less parents have to pay for college education. Because you're getting your credits.
You're not anymore,
You don't get credits anymore?
Only if you get a 4 or 5 on that.
barely even then.
They were talking about it the other night.
Oh,
Really?
Then I would just juxtapose in that same period, and I just find that fascinating data. 2015 to present, inflation has been 3.24. So you're 3.26.
it's right on.
Oh,
the-
that's interesting, yeah.
That's as close as you're gonna get to an inflationary.
Which, if you think about,
That's the big inflationary data, not core. So there's a lot of things in there, but.
right, but that's interesting. It smooths out to like being very similar.
Yeah,
Because if you're carrying the same number of teachers or staff,
exactly, yeah.
then, and you're doing a salary adjustments or whatever, and you're upgrading infrastructure, then, you know.
Right, and your point is well taken. If your largest cost is employees and you have a negotiation every couple of years, they're looking at a trending inflation saying, we have to at least keep up with inflation, right? And that's why it probably tracks so close.
Right. Yeah. So I just thought this was helpful context to all of these conversations we have around school budget. And I'm curious if, you know, Jake or Chris or Pam if there's anything surprising in this information.
Ben, in the communities that you looked at, what were the numbers that you came up with for regional school districts? And what were some of the districts that came in around 2.5?
Oh, okay, I can tell you the ones that came in at 2.5. Triton, Pentucket, Nahant, which is tiny, like almost non-comparable to the other ones. Salem came in at 2.99, just to be, you know.
Just over the line.
And Salem has, I was kind of interested that Salem it was a 9.25% decline in enrollment. I would have thought there would have been,
I would have thought it'd be closer to a Haverhill.
right, because they've had a growth in
Ben,
English
what, did you
learners.
say what the enrollment was for Manchester, sorry, decline?
20.3. Since, now, this is not from the peak year, by the way, because I didn't go back to I think 2012, 2013 was the peak.
Yeah.
In terms of the bubble year, and I didn't go back that
So except for
far.
Rockport, is there, what other schools are?
Oh, so sorry, so in terms, but to Pam's question about the below 3%, so yeah, I said Triton, Pentucket, Nahant.
What fiscal year was this, Ben?
This is, well, first of all, this is total expenditure reported to DESI, and this is average annualized over 8 years.
But what's the last year reported? 22 or 23?
It's 22.
Yeah. So
it's
Pentucket
24.
then went on to have an override in the following year. That was their a major cut year.
Okay.
So there
All
is a lot of nuance behind some of these numbers.
Yeah,
That was-
no, I get that. I totally
Yeah.
get that. Also Gloucester and Peabody, averaged under 3%, but those may have been adjusted. I mean, that's the other thing. It's just that
Striking.
I know with all the striking going on, like in Beverly and Gloucester and Marblehead, you know, I know there's so much swirling behind these numbers, which is why I caveat, like, they're
Yeah.
numbers. So, but, interesting.
And then just always go on the record to say a regional district has a different financial structure than a municipality. And a city different than a town-based municipality in terms
Right.
of how they manage their budget and where their sources of income come from.
Yeah, and there's not many regional districts, by the way, on these 29. There's Hamilton, Wenham, there's Pentucket, which I think is regional, right?
It
And
is.
Masco and Triton.
Right, so we usually compare ourselves to Hamilton Wenham, what was their, I guess, what's their decline, what's their budget?
Hamilton, Wenham, decline of 10.7%, 3.54
And our
expenditure
decline
growth.
is 20, percent?
Ours is 20.37, yeah, at 3.26. So, and I'm happy to send this to anybody who's interested. I was just trying to answer questions for myself going into the budgets.
And it would be interesting to see with those declining enrollments, if they have a shift in their school choice out dollars versus going out to private school.
Right,
So that would be interesting.
I think again, if you want to take a look at your enrollment report and we can gather some more data for you, the enrollment declines are primarily stemming from a demographic decline. So low birth rate population over a series of years and another reported shift toward young families moving to small cities. I haven't factored or read too much about immigration. We know it's a problem in terms of heads moving in, but it's not just people fleeing communities.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense to me, Pam, too, because the demographic, you know, we're fighting a demographic shift, we're fighting housing, you know,
Affordability.
lack of housing availability and affordability. So, and it's just hard for new families to move into either one of our communities is what it comes down to.
Anecdotally, we have a large number of our younger staff who actually commute from Haverhill because that's where they can find.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
So Pam, would you say the bulk of the decline is in the elementary school years versus middle school and high school years?
We exited large classes and enrolled smaller classes. Just
And a lot of those larger classes have in the last few years,
right,
I think, right?
mhm,
Because of the bubble.
but now they're
Yep.
almost under 100, aren't they?
mhm.
Yeah.
At or around 100. The upper classes are a little bit lower.
Who's the target to begin with?
Yeah,
So
the
this
thing-
analysis is to signal that you are looking for a budget to come somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5 again this year.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's like the
Oh, two
Not-
and a half.
no, not three and a half, but
I'll say no.
Under 3.
Well,
yes.
no. To be fair, the average is 3.25.
What was
3 point-
last year? 2.
3.25 is the average.
Right.
So I think if we talk, first of all, as someone on our committee always says, a number is not a strategy. So, and I think we've talked about 3.5% in the past. I think, given the enrollment declines and just given the data point, 3.5 seems rich to me in a declining enrollment environment. Unless you're just absolutely, you know, your single goal is to 100% preserve the program, you know, even if it really starts to like be pretty slim in terms of filling the different, you know, courses and sections. So, but
So, and this is Chris Reed. I know you asked if I had any comment. And it's not really a comment, maybe so much as a question. How do the towns, or I guess in extension, how would you expect the school district to account for the inflation that we've seen over the past 3 years and still realistically keep our budgets at that low cost? I'm just curious about that because at some point, those numbers don't work.
Manchester's doing it in their town budget.
Yep.
We're keeping it closer to between 2 and 2.5% increases in the town side in order to build up the schools. So, but we also do realignments of personnel. We look for efficiencies in our operations. And this, I don't know how much the school has opportunities for efficiency in the education side, but they probably have opportunities for efficiency in the admin side. Yeah.
From my understanding, we've been doing that for a decade as well, right? And I think maybe the difference in the school district is that um, you know, we have a very strong union to deal with, and it's not really a situation where we can just say, well, you know, I know that you're not getting a pay raise, and actually every year for the past 3 years in real dollars, you've been taking a pay cut, and have you know, high quality teachers stay, especially given the climate of how much teachers' salaries have been increasing and strikes occurring. And if you look at the new like teacher contracts that have been signed, you know, throughout Eastern Massachusetts and specifically in our area, I'm just not sure how realistic that is. And that's kind of a comment, but you know, I very much understand the realities of you know, town budgets and the realities of, you know, our main stakeholders, which are, you know, our residents, right, and their needs as well. So I understand all of that, but when I hear the discussion being framed in this way, it's just concerning.
I think one of the challenges is that in this teacher contracts, you have cost of living increases, which is fine, but then you also have significant increases in the various steps. So when you add those two together, those increases are much larger than any inflation factor, because usually the cost of living component is tied to the inflation, but it ignores the large step increases, which town employees don't have. We limit town employees to not very high raises, and they don't have steps. They might get some longevity bonuses, but you're talking $100 or $200 a year. I mean, you're not talking the step increases that teachers have. So that's
I
where
understand. Do all of the jobs in the town require a master's degree?
I don't, that's completely different. We're talking about increases, annual increases. The master's degree should be, you know, I worked in business world for years, 47 years. And I'll tell you, our pay was not based on our education level. It was based on the job we did. So just to give people more money because they got a master's degree, I don't necessarily agree with.
Yeah, and I guess all I'm saying is that the reality is that we deal with you know, a statewide union. So
No, I
Wish I
understand
could.
what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, Chris. And the reality is that's the art of managing a school district.
Yep.
Right? Because of the whole step in, the grid structure of pay is a big part of the nuance that's behind these numbers and how you actually want to position yourself. What's optimal on that grid? Because I can see how you wouldn't want a bunch of, you know, to be overly sort of younger, you know,
Right.
younger teachers that are coming into that step and really pushing it versus those that have
At the
been,
top.
you know,
Yeah.
at the top,
It's a
right?
balance,
Yeah, so,
strategic balance.
yeah, exactly.
I think that and I don't know what it's like now, but we were heavy on the
Experience.
15-year,
Yeah.
you know, experience column. Yeah, like, I can't remember what the number was. I remember looking at it a couple of years ago. So, you know, as they retire, you get some leeway there until your step and column.
Dean Hadish, you have your hand raised?
Yes, I just want to chime in that I kind of support what Chris is saying, and that a 3% might be a more reasonable target for preliminary budget regions, which is like 27 million, and it'd be 10.2 for Essex and 16.8 for Manchester, and that those numbers might be good target values for the preliminary budget, and whether that's affordable or not, whether we think we can support that.
Thank you.
Yep. Yep, And I think that's the question in front of us, really. I mean, I don't necessarily know we're gonna answer it, but.
No, I think we're all doing the same thing. We're all looking for efficiencies. We're all looking for places to trim. We're all experiencing, SS is experiencing a 35% increase in our electric rate. You know, starting in December. So we've had to adjust our budgets for that. I mean, we negotiated a new contract. It was significantly higher. Everyone is having to manage within the confines of 2.5% and fund the school at the same time.
And I think the challenge is the 2.5, Prop 2.5 does not take into consideration inflationary
Right.
trends. It's an arbitrary number.
Correct. And if you don't
And
have a lot
somehow
of new
we-
growth,
Yeah.
you're,
Yeah, or somehow we have to get the residents to understand that maybe 2.5% increase is not realistic and make them understand that maybe overrides aren't always a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris's point about inflation, like I like there's a psychological component to inflation in terms of you can look at the numbers, which are always backward looking, and we've seen inflation go from averaging below 2% for so many years, spiking up to over 8% at, you know, at its peak, and then is now back down to, I think the latest print was like 2.3. So do you think about inflation as like, oh, we're in a 4% environment, or we're coming back to a 2% environment? And no one knows the answer to that, right? But it does sort of frame negotiations in terms of collective bargaining is, you know, what is that cost of living adjustment? And I think we're at a difficult point right now because inflation is still part of the dialogue
Right.
every day, even though the numbers have sort of settled back down. So.
Okay, just for clarification, we are in the second year of a 4-year contract with both paras and teachers. So there is no relief coming from renegotiation for some time.
Let me call on Anna Lynn Mitchell.
Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Anna.
I was just gonna say exactly what Pam was saying, that we're already in the middle of the contract, regardless of the steps and whatnot, it is what it is, based on the contract. What I was gonna ask is, our biggest cost is the personnel, and personnel right now, we are tied in the contract right now for majority of the employees. The other one, the second biggest expense is the health insurance. Pam just said that, based on the rate that we're getting right now, we're looking at 21% increase, which is crazy to me. But so on the town side, you guys are not looking at a kind of big increase. Is it possible, and I don't know if this is even gonna work, can we group the district employees and town employees together to join the same kind of the health insurance? So like we are all growing at the same, so like we get better rates.
Greg, can you speak to that?
That's interesting.
Well, so both towns are in the Maya program. And Maya does a sort of a hybrid of looking at each entity as a separate entity, but buffering those individual entities. So there's a little bit of a pooling effect going on. You know, the district was with Maya, you shopped around and got a better deal with another vendor. You know, I have a bias towards Maya. I think long-term, you know, over the 10, 15 year look, they've done very well. But, you know, Avi was quite aggressive and was able to, you know, do quite well on shopping around for those years. But it's hard to keep that up. So to answer your question, there's not a huge advantage to going out together, because we will still be assessed individually, will be analyzed as separate entities, but there may be some pooling that we can take advantage of.
And Maya is on our shopping list for January and February. along with
And-
a look at the GIC.
Greg, isn't it also experience rated?
Yes. That's part of the, so what Maya does is they'll give a range, right? They'll give in January, they'll announce a range, and this year it'll probably be, 8 to 14%. I'm guessing. And then each individual town that belongs will be placed on that range based on experience.
In age.
And so we introduced a lot of wellness programs to help with our experience, is that correct?
That was certainly the hope. It's hard to pinpoint, an exact experience to a particular wellness program. It takes a lot of years
Yep.
to have that experience come down through wellness programs, but yes, we certainly do offer that. And the more skin in the game that the employee has, I think that's another strategy, right? To try to make sure that it's not something they just say, oh, I'm not paying much into this, so I don't need to worry about it too much. So we have tried to increase the employee percent contribution. But that's a challenging union contract negotiation item for sure.
Experience and age, right? The census also skews your rate. So if you have 75% of your enrollees over 50
Yeah, I
years
think
old.
it's just younger and older. I don't think it's.
Yeah, but that does affect your rate.
Yeah, it's younger, older, it's job classification. So police and fire are
More expensive.
considered higher risk than a teacher. I mean, there's a lot of variables that go into it. I think one thing we should try to bear in mind for why our healthcare costs have gotten more challenging over time is that in the first 10 years of the district, we weren't retiring many people. And the retirees that existed on the town's rolls, because any teacher who had retired prior to regionalization was on town side. So we've had a straight line up on the trend line for number of retirees so it's escalating over time, which is why our OPEB challenge is a significant one. So for every retiree we take, they're for the majority of them on the active plan, on the full plan until they're 65. That could be 10 years for the retiree age of a teacher. So we're not getting as much benefit from a retirement as perhaps we once did. So our retiree numbers are going up, and our active numbers are staying steady, and we've got older employees now and more active, more family plans from my recollection. Another piece that we struggle with cyclically, and I think any organization will go through this, is those I'm calling them catastrophic claims. There's a technical term for them, but those issues that exceed our ratio and push our liability up. So we're basically not paying in enough based on the usage rate. So that's what we're experiencing now. And I think what we're seeing going forward is that and Michelle can correct me, the quarters that we're dropping off for reporting are good quarters, and we're adding higher usage quarters. So we're not sure where the number is going to go, which is prompting us to go out to bid for next year. So, I mean, I think we could do a whole night just on the healthcare piece.
It's the biggest wild card, really.
And I just also offer, it is tied into the contract, and plan design is a locked in contractual obligation.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, Pam.
We
Yeah.
done with that?
I think so.
Then the next question was the independent review.
We have those funds appropriated. We haven't really figured out what or how we want to do in the context of the fact that DESI is going to be doing the review for the district. I think I think that we probably want to try and figure out what makes the most sense. And I just honestly haven't done a lot of work to rescope this. So, but I'm open to thoughts.
I think that what we heard at the town meeting, when we sought the appropriation that was voted down, is that Manchester would not support something like that unless and until the school committee is behind it. But that was what came through at our town meeting, is that if the school committee didn't support it, the town wouldn't pay for an independent audit. Isn't that what you recall?
Yep,
Marty?
that is, yeah, exactly.
So,
So how's Manchester paying for your operational audit internally?
Greg, Jody was asking me about the operational, the audit we're doing of the town. Can you explain that a little bit?
Right, we received a community compact grant from the state that's paying for that. So it's an $18,000 effort. And it's just getting underway, got underway last week, finally. Taking a look at our organizational structure, staffing, taking a look at technology, are there ways to increase gain some efficiencies through better use of technology, and as I say, looking at operations and seeing if there are any efficiencies, or how do we sort of stack up, and what recommendations an outside view might have for us.
Did I answer your question?
Which is pretty much, I think, what we were after anyway with the operational review. It's-
With the school, yeah, and we're doing it for the town, yeah.
Mhm.
Jody's doing it for Essex.
Oh, I see, okay.
For $18,000. It's a grant. It's the Harris grant.
Greg, are they looking at all departments or just the town structure? One area I think we would be more than willing to explore is there any efficiency to be found in facilities?
Yeah, so yes. so
Sharing
this-
of facility structure.
Yep. Yeah, we're just taking a look at all departments. And I can certainly sort of flag that as a area to look at.
Okay.
We liked using the school for our town meeting.
Yes,
I was very nervous.
it worked so amazingly.
Good.
well. That was a huge crowd.
Well, it's a lot of people.
I'm glad it went well.
Did you fill the auditorium?
No, we filled the gym.
Okay.
And then we used the auditorium for overflow. I think there
Right,
were a
right, so
couple
your
things-
overflow is not full, right?
Right.
Right.
I
Is
think
that-
we
is
had
that
room
gonna
for,
be done every
I think
meeting
we had
then?
room for 1,300,
Okay.
and we had 929. So that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. We usually use the, Memorial School for our town meetings.
Hmm.
Um, we were expecting more to this one, and we had more people attend.
Wow.
We offered daycare, and we had 50 people in 50 kids in daycare. Gave free daycare.
That
It
makes
worked
a
well,
difference.
but it's always risky to have two facilities, or, an auditorium and a gymnasium.
That's
When
true.
you have a technical problem, everything just slows down.
We got to the final vote,
Everybody
and
gets
somebody had
nervous.
kicked the plug and unplugged the receiver in the auditorium.
Oh,
So
no.
They
For the
couldn't
final
get their
vote.
votes to work, so luckily we had somebody on site who could fix it.
Huh. Well, our lights went out in the middle, so
Oh, okay.
right at the very beginning, actually, complete
Oh,
darkness.
something.
Always
You
something.
can't understand a word people say in that gym.
It's tough. It's very tough.
The echoes.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
the high school,
That's, yeah, it's-
yeah, we've had good luck with both Memorial School and the high school.
well, I'm sure the acoustics are much better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think moving forward, I think one of the things that we talked about last year, and I think we did kind of visit your meeting. Pam has on her schedule that she's coming to the Manchester FinCom to talk about the budget. And I think that Essex FinCom would like to do that together with Manchester FinCom, so we all hear the same thing at the same time. And if we could do that and participate equally, I think that the Essex FinCom would appreciate that. I think it, relieves stress on Pam doing 2 meetings, and we get to hear what each other has to ask, and Pam's answers at the same time. And I would like to do that really as a norm, if we could do that going forward. I think it's important.
Oh, Jody, that is an efficiency.
Does that
It
work
is.
for you,
There's an
Pam?
efficiency.
There you go.
Yeah, we're happy. I'm happy to do it either way. And we've gone to Essex in the past. Manchester just has become a standing date,
Yep.
which is why I added it. So whatever works best for the groups, we can do 2 or we can do 1. 1 is great.
I think 1's great.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay. I
Yours
don't know.
good?
Oh, I thought Jody said she knew the date.
No, Pam just said she had it March,
yeah.
earmarked to do that. And Pam, did you have a date?
I think I probably ballparked it based on the date we typically come every year. I can pull it up. I don't have it in front of me right now.
That's fine.
Second week. in
It's usually situated between the second budget meeting in January and the adoption night. And it's a Thursday usually, right? I think it's usually a Thursday that you meet.
Wednesday,
What, yeah.
I
Wednesday.
think it's been a
Okay.
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Just let us know.
We meet on Wednesday.
For those of us writing reports, it's literally been like 36 hours of.
There you go.
Anything else or we're done?
Anybody have anything else?
No.
No, well, thank you.
Sincere thanks.
Yeah,
for the-
thank you.
Thank you so much.
We enjoyed it, and the technical assistance.
Thank you.
That's great.
Making.
Now, this is recorded by 1623 Studios.
Sure.
Try with some edits.
With some edits. I hope
Not all of
they're
it, right?
edited.
Thank you. Take a motion to adjourn, Lori.
Yes,
I'll second. All
And
in
mo-
favor, yes.
yes.
Motion to adjourn for Essex. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Good night, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Night.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job.